It started with a doorbell and a borrowed book. Nothing extraordinary. At least, that's what I told myself. My best friend had left a few things at his mom's place, and I'd offer to pick them up. It was supposed to be quick, polite, forgettable. But the moment the door opened, I forgot what I came for. She stood there, a 40-year-old woman with quiet confidence in her posture, the kind that comes from years of knowing how to hold herself together. Her long black hair fell in soft waves over a light cream blouse, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal delicate wrists. Her dark brown eyes, warm yet guarded, met mine for a fraction of a second too long. "You must be here for him," she said, stepping aside. Her voice had that calm tone older women carry, steady, but with a trace of amusement beneath it. "Yeah, just grabbing his things," I replied, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. The house smelled like coffee and vanilla, soft, homey, and a little too comforting. I could feel the warmth of sunlight spilling through the window, catching the strands of her hair as she moved. It wasn't just attraction, it was presence. She made the air feel heavier, slower. While she went to fetch the books, I looked around, family photos, travel souvenirs, a vase of white lilies on the counter. Everything was neat, organized, lived in. I caught myself imagining what it must be like to live here. Quiet mornings, soft laughter, music echoing faintly from another room. She returned, holding the book in one hand, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're polite," she said, handing it over. "That's rare these days." "Maybe I was raised right," I said before realizing how it sounded. She raised an eyebrow, that knowing look adults give when they're both amused and uncertain how far to go. There was a pause, that small, invisible moment where something unspoken starts to form. She shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing mine as she passed by to set a mug down. Just a touch, light as a thought, but enough to make me forget the room for a second. "Coffee?" she asked, almost casually. I hesitated. "If it's not too much trouble." "It's never trouble," she said softly. And just like that, the line between polite and personal began to blur. The conversation drifted from casual to curious, about college, music, small things that somehow felt big because they came from her. As I left that afternoon, she stood at the door, arms folded gently, smile faint but real. "Tell him I said hi," she called out. I nodded, but my mind wasn't on him anymore. It was on the quiet warmth in her tone, and the strange new weight it left behind in my chest. That was the day I realized some doors, once opened, never really close again. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. My friend had invited a few of us over to his place, and of course, that meant she was there too. The house felt different with more people in it, louder, full of laughter and careless energy. Yet, even in all that noise, I couldn't stop noticing her. She moved around the kitchen with effortless grace, sleeves rolled up again, hair tied loosely behind her head, strands falling against her cheek when she turned. A 40-year-old woman with quiet confidence, long black hair, lightly tanned skin, and that same soft smile that never quite gave away what she was thinking. Every time she passed by, her perfume, something floral and faintly sweet, brushed against me like a whisper. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my eyes kept finding her reflection in the glass cabinet, the curve of her lips when she smiled at a joke that wasn't mine. At one point, she caught me looking. Just a glance, brief, unreadable, but enough to make my chest tighten. She looked away first, busying herself with the dishes, though I could tell she'd noticed. Later, when most of the noise had faded, I found myself in the kitchen again, helping her clean up. "You didn't have to," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "I don't mind," I replied. "Feels wrong to just sit while you do everything." Her lips curved, that same half-smile from before. "You're too good. Makes the others look bad." "I'll take that as a compliment," I said, and for a moment, the air between us shifted, not tense, not awkward, just full of quiet awareness. She handed me a plate to dry. Our fingers brushed, lightly, unintentionally, but it was enough. That small contact sent a warmth up my arm, a pulse that made it impossible to focus on anything else. She noticed too. Her gaze flickered to where our hands had touched, then back to my face, and I saw it. That tiny spark of hesitation, curiosity, maybe even conflict. "You're still in college, right?" she asked after a moment, trying to sound casual. "Graduated last spring," I said, trying to figure out what comes next. Her tone softened. "You got time. Don't rush it." I smiled faintly. "You sound like you've been there." "I have," she said quietly, looking down. "And sometimes I still am." Something in that confession made my heart ache. It wasn't flirtation anymore. It was connection. Two people who saw something in each other they weren't supposed to. As I left that night, she stood by the doorway again, her hair untied now, falling around her shoulders. "Drive safe," she said softly. I nodded, but inside I already knew safety wasn't something I was interested in anymore. Not when danger came with eyes that warmed and a voice that could turn a simple goodbye into a memory I couldn't shake. It started with small moments, the kind that seem harmless until you realize how much they've changed you. I began finding reasons to stop by more often, sometimes to pick up my friend for a drive, sometimes just to drop something off. But deep down, I think we both knew those reasons weren't real. She never called me out on it. If anything, she made it harder to stop. Every time the door opened and I saw her standing there, a 40-year-old American Latina woman with long black hair, dark brown eyes, and a smile that carried both kindness and control, I forgot why I came at all. That afternoon, the sun poured through the living room windows, making everything look softer. She wore a light beige cardigan over a fitted white blouse and jeans. Nothing fancy, yet somehow she made it look like a quiet statement. Her confidence didn't need attention. It drew it naturally. "You again," she teased gently as I stepped in. "You're going to wear out that doorbell." "Maybe I just like good company," I said. Her brow arched, but she didn't push it. Instead, she motioned toward the kitchen. "Coffee." I nodded, pretending it was just polite conversation, but when she handed me the cup, her fingers brushed mine again. That simple contact, casual, unintentional, felt heavier than it should have. Like the universe kept giving us these small, dangerous moments to test what we do with them. She sat across from me at the table, sunlight resting over her face, highlighting the faint smile lines near her eyes, the kind you earn through years of laughter and loss. "You know," she said softly, stirring her coffee, "you remind me a little of how I used to be." I tilted my head. "How's that?" "Restless. Always searching for something more, even when I already had enough." There was something about the way she said it. Not regretful, but tired. Like she'd learned too much about holding herself back. "Maybe you still are," I said quietly. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady, unreadable. For a long second, neither of us looked away. There was no background noise, no one else around, just the sound of our breathing and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured finally, her tone more of a warning to herself than to me. "Why not?" I asked. She smiled, a slow, wistful curve of her lips. "Because they make it harder to remember what's right." The air between us thickened. Neither of us moved, yet everything inside me felt like it already had. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door, standing a little too close, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the frame. "You're too young to understand," she whispered. I met her gaze. Maybe I'm just old enough to stop pretending I don't. For a second, I thought she might close the distance between us. But she didn't. She just looked away, as if saving both of us from something we weren't ready to name yet. And that's when I knew the line between us wasn't just drawn by rules. It was drawn by fear, and both of us were getting closer to crossing it. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world feels slow, almost tender. My friend had gone out for the day, and I'd stopped by to return a book I'd borrowed weeks ago. I told myself I'd drop it off and leave, nothing more. But when she opened the door, something in her expression, tired, soft, and a little lonely, made it impossible to walk away. She stood there in a simple gray sweater and soft linen pants, her hair down in loose waves that brushed against her shoulders. The 40-year-old American Latina woman, with her graceful figure and dark, thoughtful eyes, looked less guarded than usual. Like she wasn't the strong, composed mother I was used to seeing, just someone craving a bit of warmth on a quiet day. "Come in," she said, her voice calm but distant. You can stay for coffee if you want. I followed her into the living room. The light was warm, spilling through the window, touching everything with a golden calm. She set down 2 mugs on the table, her movements slower than usual, deliberate, maybe because she felt it too. The weight of something unspoken between us. We talked for a while about simple things, life, work plans, but the pauses grew longer. The silences between our words started to feel heavier than the words themselves. At one point, she laughed at something I said, and when her laughter faded, her gaze lingered on me, steady, thoughtful. You really don't see the difference, do you? What difference? I asked quietly. The one between what we want and what we're supposed to want. Her voice was calm, but her fingers trembled slightly around her mug. I could see her fighting something, reason maybe, guilt, but also longing. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, eyes fixed on hers. I see it, I said softly. I just don't care about it the way I used to. That silence that followed was unbearable, thick with emotion neither of us wanted to admit. She set her mug down and looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. This is wrong. Then tell me to leave, I said. Her eyes flicked back to mine, startled then softening. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just sat there, the conflict clear in her eyes, until finally she sighed, almost inaudibly. Stay for a while, she murmured. It wasn't an invitation to anything more. Not yet. But it was something. A choice made between what felt right and what the world said was. We sat in silence, the sound of the ticking clock filling the room. She reached to take the empty mug from my hand, and her fingers brushed mine, slow, deliberate this time. Neither of us pulled away. For a moment, nothing existed beyond that small touch. The warmth of her skin, the faint tremor in her breath, the ache that came from knowing this moment shouldn't exist. But it did. And as I looked at her, the woman who'd once seemed untouchable, I realized something. Rules weren't made to protect love, they were made to test it. And right then, both of us were failing beautifully. After that day, everything changed. Not in words, but in the way silence started meaning more than conversation ever could. She didn't say it, and neither did I, but we both began avoiding the places we used to meet. I stopped showing up unannounced. She stopped offering coffee. Still, the absence didn't fix anything. It only made the ache worse. Weeks passed. I tried convincing myself that it had just been a moment, a lapse, a spark we'd imagined. But every time my phone buzzed, every time I passed by her street, my mind betrayed me. I thought of the way she'd said stay for a while, the sound of it soft and trembling, like she'd said it against her better judgment. Then, one evening, the distance broke. I had gone to drop off something for my friend, another ordinary excuse, and found her outside, tending to her small garden under the fading light. The air smelled like wet grass and jasmine. She wore a loose denim shirt over a white tank, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her long black hair tied in a low knot. She looked peaceful until she saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. The sun was dipping low behind her, casting a golden hue across her lightly tanned skin. She took a slow breath. You shouldn't keep showing up like this, she said, but there wasn't anger in her tone, just worry. I wasn't planning to, I replied quietly. It just happened. Her lips curved into a half smile, sad and knowing. That's the problem with things that just happen. They rarely stay harmless. I want to tell her I understood, that I wasn't trying to make things harder. But the words stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Instead, I said softly, do you really want me to go? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze softened, drifting from my face to the small patch of flowers she'd been tending. You make it hard to remember why I should say yes. The quiet between us felt heavier than ever, the kind of silence filled with things we weren't brave enough to say. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint sweetness of her perfume mixing with the earthy scent of soil. I can leave, I whispered, but you'll still feel it. Same as I do. Her breath caught, barely, but I noticed. Her hands stilled, dirt clinging to her fingers. Slowly, she straightened up, eyes meeting mine again, uncertain and fierce all at once. You're too young, she said, her voice trembling slightly. And too ready, I replied before I could stop myself. That broke her stillness. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, to scold, to remind me of all the reasons why this couldn't be. But the words never came. Instead, she looked away, pressing a hand against her temple, as if trying to steady her thoughts. "Please," she whispered finally, "don't make me choose." But it was too late. In that single look, in that trembling silence, I knew the choice was already made. Not in words, not in rules broken, but in the way her heart had stopped pretending to be untouched. And for the first time, she didn't stop me from stepping closer. It happened on a Thursday night. One of those evenings when everything feels suspended between wanting and restraint. My friend was away for the weekend, and I told myself I was only going to return something I borrowed. A small thing, a harmless excuse. But deep down, I knew why I was really there. The house was dimly lit, but warm, soft yellow light spilling from the lamps, the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows. She opened the door in a loose cream sweater and jeans, her long black hair falling naturally over her shoulders. The 40-year-old American Latino woman, with her graceful figure and dark brown eyes, looked startled to see me. Still, she didn't close the door. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know," I replied. But neither of us meant for any of this to happen. For a moment, we just stood there, two people caught between what was right and what felt inevitable. She finally stepped aside, allowing me in, though her gaze stayed guarded, her voice quieter now. "If anyone saw, they won't," I interrupted. "I just wanted to talk." We sat at the edge of the couch, a safe distance apart that felt anything but safe. The ticking clock filled the space where our words refused to go. Her hands were clasped in her lap, fingers fidgeting slightly, a rare crack in her composed exterior. "You think this is simple," she said after a long silence. "But it's not. You're young. You still have time to make mistakes that don't follow you for years." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, voice low but steady. "And you think what we feel is one of those mistakes?" Her breath caught. She looked up at me, eyes shimmering with something I couldn't quite name. Fear, longing, maybe both. "It has to be," she whispered. "Because if it isn't, then I don't know how to stop." That confession landed like a heartbeat, sudden, raw, and real. I didn't reach for her, not yet. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw the way her lips trembled when she tried to stay strong. "You've been pretending," I said gently. "But you feel it too." Her eyes closed for a moment, and she nodded, barely, but it was enough. "Every time you walk away," she admitted, "I tell myself it's over. And then I wait for it to happen again." The rain outside grew heavier, like the world was echoing everything we couldn't say aloud. When she opened her eyes again, they met mine. No defenses left, no rules between us. "You make me remember what it's like to feel alive," she said, her voice trembling. "And that terrifies me." Slowly, I reached out, not to take, not to claim, but simply to hold her hand. Her fingers hesitated, then tightened around mine, warm and unsteady. For a long moment, we didn't move. There was no need to. The silence carried everything. The fear, the tenderness, the realization that this was no longer something we could deny. She finally whispered, "If we cross this line, there's no going back." I squeezed her hand lightly. Maybe we were never meant to. Outside, thunder rolled softly. Inside, she didn't let go. And for the first time, neither did I. The next morning felt softer than it should have, like the world had chosen to hold its breath with us. The storm had passed sometime during the night, leaving the air washed clean, the streets outside glistening under pale sunlight. Inside her living room, everything was still. The rain had taken the noise, the tension, even the need for words. She sat by the window, a cup of coffee in her hands, wearing a light blue robe tied loosely around her waist. The 40-year-old American Latino woman, graceful, mature, and effortlessly beautiful, looked calm but distant, her long black hair falling in gentle waves over one shoulder. Her eyes, dark and quiet, watched the world outside like she was searching for an answer she already knew. I stood by the kitchen counter, trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed right. Everything that could be said felt too small for what had already happened. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and thoughtful. You know what scares me? I turned toward her. What? That this doesn't feel wrong anymore. She set the mug down, turning her gaze to me. I've spent years building walls around myself, protecting my life, my son, my peace. And now you walk in and make all of it feel temporary. Her honesty hit hard, not because it hurt, but because it was exactly what I felt too. That dizzying mix of guilt and relief, fear and freedom. I walked closer, slow enough not to startle the fragile calm between us. Maybe it's not about tearing down your walls, I said quietly. Maybe it's about realizing you built them around something that deserves to breathe. She looked up at me, a long, searching look. Then, with a soft exhale, she whispered, "You talk like you've lived a lifetime already." "Maybe I just learned faster," I said. "Maybe from you." A faint smile touched her lips, the kind that was half sadness, half warmth. She reached out and brushed her fingers over my wrist, her touch feather-light but grounding. "You don't understand," she murmured. "If anyone finds out, I don't care who finds out," I said before she could finish. Her hand paused. For a second, I thought she'd pull away, but she didn't. Instead, her thumb traced slow circles against my skin, the same motion someone makes when they're trying to memorize a moment they know won't last forever. "Life doesn't always give you what feels right," she said softly. "But sometimes it gives you what you need, just long enough to remind you that you're still human." I stepped closer, close enough to feel her breath against my chest. "Then let's not waste it." She smiled, small, trembling, but real. "You really don't make this easy, do you?" "No," he whispered, "and neither do you." Her head rested lightly against my shoulder, and for the first time, we didn't need to speak. There was no plan, no promise, no ending. Just two people standing in the quiet aftermath of something that shouldn't have happened, but somehow still felt like it was meant to. Outside, the light grew brighter, spilling through the window and wrapping around us both. She finally whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe some rules are worth breaking, if it means feeling alive again." And in that moment, I knew we hadn't broken something fragile. We'd simply found something real in the space where rules used to live.